Welcome to Slick Talk. This is your host, Blackstone Joe, and in today's episode, at least for this cold open, which is totally serious and not putting on any sort of dramatic front whatsoever, I find myself in a variety of moods, both celebratory and, if you can believe it, slightly somber. If you can hearken back to episode 68 of Slick Talk, you know that your host, your source for all things used oil analysis, has been under attack. This attack has not been physical in nature, no. It's been mental, it's been material. It's been in the form of multiple copies of Paul Blart 2, Blart Rides Again. These DVDs have been sent in anonymous packages to my office, my place of work, my dojo of petroleum-based analysis. And folks, this distribution of unwanted Kevin James content, it remains unfettered. In fact, the attacks have become varied. I find myself in possession of a package containing multiple stickers, blown up photos of Kevin James's mug, a photo of him playing Guitar Hero taken from this film, and finally, what is most disturbing, a photo of Paul Blart with ransom letter style arrangement of words pasted together to form the lyrics from Evanescence's seminal hit, Bring Me to Life. The words in question are Wake Me Up Inside. And folks, I am awake and I am aware. The celebratory nature of this episode is that I have found the culprits, and with that, I want to apologize to you, loyal listeners, Slick Talk Nation, for accusing you of possibly having the culprit within your ranks. That was not true, no. The perpetrator, or rather perpetrators, of this Paul Blart crime, they are within the very walls of Blackstone. That's right. This has been an inside job. My vengeance will be forthwith, and I will keep you posted on how I'm going to deal with the perpetrators, but rest assured, dealt with they shall be. The Paul Blart saga comes to a soft conclusion here. I will be updating you on my counter-attack, as well as posting online the materials which I am having in my possession. The stickers, the DVDs, you'll see it all. You deserve that, and much more from your host. And now, it's time to talk oil. All right, folks. Blackstone Joe, the Blackstone Joe you're more familiar with, the one that's not having a very good time putting on a performance as a paranoid radio host, is back. I am here to talk about oil, used oil analysis to be specific, and in today's episode, I have a couple of topics here. I'm going to be talking about a Lycoming owner that made the switch to Aeroshell 1550 and the results that ensued. I'm also going to be taking a look at a Yamaha marine engine where there was evidence of seawater contamination, and the customer had some very good questions about what the results meant, why they didn't meet the owner's expectations. Even if you are not an aircraft or a marine engine owner, I'm sure you will take something away from this episode. There is so much that goes into how we determine these results and how these results apply to not only the engines that we're going to be talking about today, but really the fundamentals of used oil analysis, how we monitor elements and trends, and of course, how important it is to tell us what exactly it is that you're sampling. First off, I was taking a look at a sample from a Lycoming engine, one that we had a good trend established for. But something changed, specifically in regards to the amount of copper we were finding in this engine's oil. Over the years, we've been accustomed to levels in the single digits. Most recently, this engine had put up a trend of 6 parts per million to 5, another 5, and then we saw quite a noticeable change, a jump to 33 parts per million. For reference, this level wouldn't just be high compared to past trends for this engine in particular, it'd also be high compared to our averages for the engine type. Everything else, though, looked quite good. We had wear levels that were in good standing, not varying significantly from recent trends. So all we had that was out of the ordinary was a high copper level. With that, we knew that there was a likely explanation for it because without a high level of silicon, for example, it wouldn't really make sense for copper to show wear in. That is a possibility, of course, but generally, if you have high copper from wear in, you tend to have high silicon from sealer. These are two things that go together, and also a reason why you want to send in a used oil sample to Blackstone. We don't just look at one high level, we look at what else is going on in the remaining elements to see what might be going on. And in those remaining elements, we also saw a high level of phosphorus. Phosphorus is an additive in some aircraft engine oils, but not all of them. In this case, the oil was Aeroshell 1550. Now, this is not meant to be any sort of expose. Rather, I'm just going to detail what we see, what we expect when a Lycoming owner makes the switch to 1550, and that is exactly what happened in this sample. An increase in copper, but everything else stayed quiet as far as how the elements matched up with past trends for the engine. So the owner makes the switch. They did a good job of letting us know the oil they switched to. There was no ambiguity there, because if this oil was, say W80 plus, then we wouldn't necessarily be able to assign high copper to the change in oil. Really, this mainly happens with 1550. So while it would have been a possibility without knowing the oil they switched to, having that information concrete and on the form, and also seeing that increase in phosphorus that goes along with this oil being in use, gave us all the hallmarks necessary to lean on a harmless reaction between the oil and internal parts. I don't think that's something I mentioned earlier, so I want to key on that for a moment here. The increase in copper doesn't speak to the oil working poorly. It doesn't mean that brass and bronze parts suddenly start to wear differently. Rather, this increase is a harmless reaction between the oil and nitrided parts. So if you see the increase with the change in oil, that's okay. What we don't want to see is a steady increase or spike with that oil in use, because if you do have a steady increase or spike with that oil in use, then that is when we start to be wary of poor wear at brass and bronze parts, in addition to whatever copper is coming from a harmless reaction between the oil and internal parts. So what we will do in the future for this owner is monitor copper and see if it steadily increases or spikes, but as long as it's stable with that oil in use, we'll have confidence in it merely being a reflection of this harmless reaction. So I want to recap and key on a couple of points. If you're a Lycoming owner and you make the switch to 1550, be sure to note it on the slip. And also, don't be surprised by an increase in copper. We know it's going to come. However, even if there is that usual increase in copper, we'll still have an interest in monitoring the trend. You always want to be wary of looking at a result, and even if it has a harmless and likely explanation, leaving it alone and never revisiting it. We know the likely reason, but we also know that if we see a steady increase or spike in copper with that oil in use, you don't merely want to say, oh, harmless, we're not going to check back on it. No, we want to see the trend. Just don't be alarmed by the increase when you have that change in oil type. And let us know what else is going on. If you have repairs take place right along with the change in oil type, then we might see an increase in copper, but also other elements. We might see silicon from sealers. So let us know what's changed on your end. In addition to the oil type, we always want to know if there's been a difference in operation, if there's been a difference in the maintenance plan, all of the factors that could apply to what we're finding in the used oil. And again, this is something unique to Lycoming engines. If you're a Continental owner, for example, and you switch to 1550, we will not expect there to be an increase in copper like we see in Lycomings. And again, this increase, when it occurs in a Lycoming engine, it's not due to the oil being a bad product. It is a harmless reaction when we see this increase, and we'll just want to keep an eye on copper as trends build. Unique to Lycomings, Also not an issue, but something to be aware of whenever you're making the change from one oil type to 1550. Switching gears, we're going to talk about a Yamaha marine engine where the customer had a problem with seawater contamination. That much was clear in the spectral analysis where we saw a high level of sodium. Now, in the event of seawater contamination, you're going to have that sodium, but this owner was wondering why we weren't finding actual water in the used oil to go along with it. I think that's a really good question. It's something that, from the analyst's chair, we are so used to seeing sodium and not necessarily the water that it's good to have a reminder that customers will wonder about this too. So here's a common scenario. Seawater will reach the engine oil, but the actual water will boil off while the oil is reaching operating temperature. Importantly, though, sodium works as a chemical footprint of sorts, and that leaves behind evidence of seawater reaching the engine oil so that even when the moisture has boiled off, we can still find the key indicators of it reaching the oil, and that way we can tell you there's a problem, even if you do not notice an unusual appearance with the oil itself or the presence of there actually being moisture in the oil when you take the sample. Now, of course, if the situation is bad enough, we will come across samples where there is water present, so much water that the engine was not able to get rid of it while the oil was reaching operating temperature. These are, of course, the more dire situations, and in those events, we tend to take a more cautionary tone when we are finding samples where there is both a high sodium level and visible water. That is when things are really going from bad to worse. More often, we're finding the samples that have a high sodium level and not necessarily water. And I think the reason is people are testing before a problem is noticeable on their end, before it's really become catastrophic. That covers our used oil analysis portion of this episode, but now I want to switch gears to some content we've added to our YouTube channel. A few videos I'm really excited about. I want to make sure you are all aware of. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, do so right away. You're going to see the most recent content being a trailer for Slick Talk, something that I think, even if you are familiar with Slick Talk already, this trailer does a good job of illustrating not just a common scenario where one would be listening to Slick Talk, but also it involves sampling with the vacuum pump. During the video, you can see an overview of sampling with the pump, and if you want to know more about it, we have an actual instructional video solely dedicated on sampling with the pump. And if that's not something you knew was a thing, go to our website, check out the instructional video on how to sample with the vacuum pump. You can also order a pump if that's something you're interested in, and that way you can take samples during oil runs. You can use this pump for whatever you are sampling that has a dipstick that you can access. And that way, if you're in a pre-buy situation, or if you're trying to go longer between oil changes and you want to make sure the engine and the oil are handling it fine, you can check with the pump, and that way you have a way to have a look at things. Also, you can use this pump for, again, like I said, anything that has a dipstick that you are able to access. We include tubing with the pump, so if you order it online, you can receive tubing. You can also buy more of it if you need to. Tubing is something you want to clean out if you're using the pump to sample multiple engines, multiple transmissions, etc. But we will send some with the pump. So consider picking one of those up. If you're interested in sampling without draining the oil, let us know what you think of the trailer. And also, don't hesitate to share it on your social media channels. Let more people know what this podcast is about, as it is a very niche type of program. We're kind of aware that some people might wonder what in the world an oil analysis podcast would have to cover. This does a good job of including a look at the sort of material that you'll hear in an episode, as well as, again, a scenario where one would find themselves listening to Slick Talk. We also think that just looks and sounds pretty darn cool too. So check that out on our YouTube channel. It's right on the homepage. We also have videos on oil slips and understanding your oil report. So if you've ever been in a situation where you're not sure what something means on the slip, why we need to know about it, Oil Slip 101 has a full breakdown of the slip, the questions we ask, what they mean, and how all that information goes into providing the best report possible. And finally, understanding your oil report, we did a redux. There was a video, I think about 7 years ago, done on this topic, and we wanted to update it and just give you a walkthrough of how we go about oil analysis, what sets us apart in the industry. And similar to the oil slip video, it is a breakdown. It is a way for you to understand what goes into the analyst process, each and every aspect of the standard analysis, what it all means. Helpful resources. Also, again, it gives you a look behind the curtain that you won't get anywhere else. So check out those videos on our YouTube channel. Let us know what you think of them. Comment, share, and as always, thanks for listening.